They said you're not welcome this Easter. We're keeping Easter for close family only this year, my mom said. I wasn't angry. I was tired of being used. So I canceled every utility I paid for, and when the lights went out, so did I. For good. She opened the door, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "You're not welcome this Easter." I didn't argue. I just turned around and shut everything off behind me. You ever get hit by a sentence so cold, it doesn't even sting right away? It just kind of hovers, freezes in the air between you and the person you never thought would say it? That was me. Standing on the porch of my mother's house in West Haven, Oregon, box of pastries in one hand, an envelope in the other, tucked under my arm. Inside, receipts for the groceries I'd prepaid, the electric bill I'd covered, and the heating oil I ordered last week because I knew it'd drop into the 30s that weekend. And then she said it, "You're not welcome this Easter." Before we go further, don't forget to like this story, hit subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Whispered. Like a secret. Like a curse. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. I just stood there, letting the weight of it settle. The porch creaked behind me as I shifted, feeling like the wooden slats themselves wanted to say, "You don't deserve this." But she didn't flinch. She just stood there, my mom, Claire, wrapped in her old church cardigan, holding the door halfway open like she was protecting someone inside from me. Which, in a way, she was. Savannah, my older sister, had parked right out front. I recognized her car immediately. New tires. New tint. Probably paid for with a tax return I helped her file. She was inside. I wasn't. You have to understand something. This wasn't just a missed invitation. This was intentional. This was surgical. This was my family saying, "We don't want you here, even if you paid for dinner." And yes, I did. I paid for the groceries through a family friend who works at Ridgegrove Market. Called in a favor. Even added a ham I wouldn't be eating. I'd even transferred $400 to Savannah a few days earlier to help with decorations and supplies. No one told me there was no seat for me. Not until I was standing on the porch, with their dinner in my arms. The thing is, this wasn't sudden. It was just the first time they said it out loud. For years, I've been the default son. Not the loud one. Not the golden child. Just the one who handled it. The electric bill? I paid it. The broken hot water heater? I called a guy. Gas cards? Groceries? Subscriptions? Rent back pay? Covered. Not because I was rich. Because I was guilty. Because I grew up thinking love was something you earned by showing up with cash and silence. After she said it, after Claire dropped that whisper like a blade, she didn't wait for a response. She just closed the door. Gently. Like I was a salesman. Like I wasn't the reason her lights stayed on this month. I stood there for another 10 seconds. Then I placed the pastries down on the mat, pulled the envelope from under my arm, slid it through the door frame. Inside were copies of the electric bill I'd paid 2 days ago, $198.32, a receipt for the oil delivery, $312, the grocery order confirmation, a note. Paid. You're welcome. It's the last time. Then I turned, walked back to my car, and drove home. I didn't cry on the drive. I didn't curse. I didn't blast music and scream into the void like in the movies. I just turned it all off. In my head. And then, later, literally. Because once I got back to my place, I sat down with my laptop, pulled up my finances, logged into every account I managed, my account, the one where all the autopays came from, and I started cutting cords. West Haven utilities, autopay disabled. Heatline delivery, canceled future orders. Cell plan, removed all shared lines. Streaming accounts, changed the passwords. Grocery app, unlinked their address. Emergency Venmo fund, emptied. Closed. Gone. Each click felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. It wasn't revenge. It was release. By 7 p.m., the lights in their house were probably still on. The oven probably still warm. The scent of brown sugar and cloves probably filled the air. They were eating the food I paid for, telling stories in a house I quietly maintained, toasting with glasses I'd bought for Claire's birthday last year. And I was sitting on my balcony, alone, but not lonely, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't begging to belong. Later that night, Savannah texted me, "Are you okay?" I stared at the screen. felt the venom bubbling under the politeness. You didn't have to make it dramatic. There it was. The twist. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't angry. I was done. I wasn't their son. I was a subscription. Looking back now, I can't even remember when it started. Not the first time I gave, but the first time it stopped being a favor and became a function. I didn't live in my parents' house anymore. I hadn't in years. But somehow, I was still paying for it like I never left. The cell phone plan was the first thing. It happened when I was about 23, fresh out of school. My first real job with a modest paycheck and a head full of, this is what good sons do. Claire, my mom, called one night and said, "Hey, your sister's having issues with her phone. Can we just roll her onto your plan for a few months?" A few months turned into 8 years. 8. Savannah never once offered to take over. Never even asked what the bill was. Just texted every few weeks to say, "Hey, I need more data. Can you bump it up?" And I did. Like an idiot. Then came the utilities. Dad, or rather George, was the kind of man who believed real men didn't ask for help unless they wanted to feel powerful about how much they were sacrificing. When he lost his job at the tire shop, he didn't tell anyone. Claire called me in tears. "He hasn't told Savannah. He's embarrassed. Can you just cover the electric bill for a bit?" That bit became permanent. I added it to my calendar like a recurring meeting. Claire's light bill, $212. "No, thank you," ever followed. Not once. Groceries? I had a standing order through a discount delivery service. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Coffee, cereal, paper towels, cleaning stuff, and whatever Claire put in the group text. She even got bold with it. Once, she sent, "Can we throw in some salmon next time?" And oh, George wants that bourbon glazed ham again. Like I was their personal Instacart with no tip required. Savannah? Oh, Savannah. She played the struggling single mom card flawlessly. Except she wasn't a single mom. She was a mom with a live-in boyfriend who somehow never chipped in but always seemed to have new sneakers and a fresh fade every other week. "Things are just tight right now," she'd say. "Can you float the car insurance this month?" I floated it. Then floated the rent deposit when they got a 3-day notice. Then bought Lila's Halloween costume and the Christmas tree, and even, yes, Savannah's dog's vet bill when he had that weird lump. I was an ATM with emotional facial recognition. Smile? Approved. Tears? Extra funds. But here's the wild part. None of them ever asked how I was doing. Not once. Not when I had to skip vacation because rent and their bills ate my savings. Not when I ended a 2-year relationship because my partner said, "I feel like your family's your marriage." Not when I had surgery and had to take an Uber home from the hospital alone. They didn't ask. Because I never told. Because I was scared that if I stopped giving, I'd stop being valuable. It was subtle, the way they ghosted my milestones. My birthday? A text from Claire and a shared photo from 10 years ago. Savannah forgot altogether last year. George hasn't said it in 3. But every Mother's Day, I made sure Claire had flowers on the porch and brunch reservations, even if I wasn't invited. I just wanted to matter. Then came the moment that cracked it all open. About 6 months before Easter, I was visiting to help George fix the porch railing. He was outside. Savannah had just left to pick up something, and Claire didn't realize I was in the hallway. She was on the phone. "I mean, it's not like he has a real life," she said. "No wife, no kids, he's always free. Of course he helps." A pause. Then, "He owes it, honestly. We gave up so much for him." I stood there, heart hammering. Not from shock. From confirmation. They didn't love me. They were collecting interest. That night, I went home and cried in my car. Like a grown man sobbing behind the wheel in a quiet parking garage. Because I finally realized I wasn't a son. I was a lifeline they never expected to lose. From then on, I started counting things. Not dollars. Moments. Every time I showed up and wasn't offered a glass of water. Every thanks that never came. Every time they asked, "Can you?" But never, "How are you?" It added up. And by the time Easter rolled around, the weight was already on my back. All I needed was the final push. Claire gave it to me. "You're not welcome this Easter." She wasn't just talking about Sunday dinner. She was talking about every part of their world where I didn't play the role of helper, fixer, doormat. So I left. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was abandoning them. I felt like I was coming home to myself. They didn't notice when I was breaking, but they noticed when the Wi-Fi stopped working. I didn't expect the silence to last. Not really. After I walked away from Claire's front porch that Easter, after she told me I wasn't welcome, after I canceled the bills, shut off the streaming accounts, and wiped my hands of the family's financial mess, I figured I'd get a call within 24 hours. I imagined the moment. Claire calling, voice brittle, asking, "Did you cancel the electric bill?" Savannah texting in all caps about the Wi-Fi being down. George calling me a damn child while trying to reboot the modem. But instead, nothing. For 36 hours. Not a text. Not a missed call. Not a single notification. That's how I knew they hadn't noticed me as a person for a long time. Only as a provider. Then, right on cue, just after 9 p.m. Monday night, the group text thread lit up like a Christmas tree. It started with Savannah. Is anyone else's internet out? Then, Lila's freaking out. Her tablet won't connect. Claire chimed in next. TV's not working either. It keeps asking for a login. George added a single word. I didn't answer. Instead, I scrolled through the thread, took a sip of water, and let the guilt try to claw its way in. It didn't make it. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't jumping to fix anything. 10 minutes later, Savannah texted me directly. "Hey, can you check if the payment for the Wi-Fi bounced or something? It's under your name, right?" I typed back, "Nope, it's not. Send." She replied almost instantly. "Wait, what does that mean?" "It means the account's closed." Pause. Then, "You're kidding." I didn't respond. "Okay. WTF is going on?" "Lila has homework. I'm trying to get her school stuff printed, and now the printer won't connect." Still silent. Then came the inevitable guilt panic cocktail. "Are you mad about Easter? You could have just said something instead of cutting us off like this." "Cutting you off?" I laughed out loud. I hadn't cut them off. I disconnected from a role I was never asked if I wanted. Tuesday morning, the call started. Claire was first. I let it ring. Then George. Straight to voicemail. Then Savannah again, and this time, she left a voice message. "Okay, you've made your point. You're mad. You're hurt. But this isn't the way to deal with it." "The way to deal with it?" "Oh, you mean after being told to my face that I wasn't welcome? After buying groceries for a meal I wouldn't be allowed to sit at? After paying your car insurance while skipping upgrades on my own? Sure. Let's talk about the way." By Wednesday, the cracks were showing. Claire texted, "I had to borrow money from Natalie for the light bill. I can't believe you left us like this." I stared at the message. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say she understood. She just couldn't believe I stopped being convenient. A few hours later, Savannah sent a photo of Lila holding a tablet with a connect to Wi-Fi screen. "She's crying. Hope you're happy." I wanted to scream. Not because I didn't care, but because that child was being used like a prop in a guilt play I hadn't agreed to attend. I started typing a response. Deleted it. Started again. Deleted that, too. Then just wrote, "You could have bought your own internet years ago." She didn't respond. Not right away, anyway. That night, I watched a show alone. On my own account. In my own space. With lights I paid for, and silence I chose. And as the credits rolled, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from George. Just 4 words. "You made your point." No apology. No ownership. Just a man upset the help walked out. By the end of the week, the cell phone stopped working. The heat went off briefly before Claire scraped together money from a cousin. Savannah borrowed a hotspot from her neighbor. George supposedly went down to the electric office to sort this mess out and ended up yelling at a 22-year-old clerk. The power was still on, but the power dynamic had shifted permanently. I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. Because here's the truth, they didn't fall apart because I was cruel. They fell apart because they'd never learned how to hold themselves up. And I'd been their scaffolding for over a decade. Quiet. Steady. Hidden. Now, they were looking around and realizing the walls didn't stand on their own. It's funny. All these years, I worried that if I stopped giving, they'd stop loving me. But what really happened? I stopped giving, and they finally showed me the version of themselves I never needed to love in the first place. They knocked on my door like I was the problem. I opened it like I was the solution, that left. It happened on a Sunday. Exactly 1 week after Easter. I was folding laundry in the quiet, sunlit living room of my apartment, enjoying the stillness, when I heard the knock. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't gentle. It was the kind of knock people use when they feel entitled to be let in. I opened the door, slowly, calmly, and there they were. Claire, standing stiff in a beige cardigan, arms crossed like she was preparing for a PDA meeting. Savannah, with her phone already in hand like she was ready to read off a list of complaints. And behind them, George, hands in pockets, eyes narrowed like he was already annoyed by something that hadn't even happened yet. I leaned against the doorframe. "Hi," I said, without inviting them in. Claire jumped first. "Can we come in?" I looked at her, then looked at my own living room behind me. Warm, clean, peaceful, and said, "Why?" She blinked. "To talk. About." Savannah stepped forward. "Don't do this. You're being dramatic." That was it. That was the trigger. Not the knock. Not the fake concern. That line. Because the moment someone calls your boundaries dramatic, what they really mean is, "How dare you inconvenience me with your pain?" I didn't move. Didn't step aside. Just stood there and said no. Claire's face twitched. "This isn't how family handles things." I smiled. "No, you're right. Family doesn't." George cut in. "We raised you better than this." And there it was. The phrase. The guilt missile. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. Letting it click, not slam, shut. Then I faced them. All of them. Hands free. Voice steady. Soul done. "You raised me to put everyone else first," I said. "You raised me to solve problems quietly, pay bills without asking questions, and keep the peace even when I was drowning." Claire opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "Let me finish." And for once, they let me. "You didn't call me on my birthday last year," I said, eyes on her. "But you did call when the heater broke. You didn't check on me when I had surgery, Savannah. But you did ask if I could cover the difference on your car payment. You didn't invite me to Easter, Mom. But you cashed the grocery gift card." George scoffed. "So this is all about money?" I turned to him, calm as ice. "No, it's about value. Mine. And how you only see it when it benefits you." Silence. Savannah fidgeted with her phone. Claire blinked rapidly. George clenched his jaw. "You could have said something," Claire whispered. I nodded. "I did. Every month. Every bill. Every time I said, sure, when I wanted to scream, help me, too. You just weren't listening." Claire's voice cracked. "We never meant to hurt you. You didn't have to mean it," I said. "You just had to benefit from it." Savannah finally snapped. "You're acting like you're some victim. But you're the one who chose to help." "Exactly," I said. "And now I'm choosing not to. That's the part that's killing you. Not that I changed, but that I've finally stopped choosing you." George stepped forward. "You're going to regret this." And I laughed. Laughed in a way that startled even me. "George, I regretted staying quiet for 10 years. I regretted thinking I needed to buy my seat at the table. I regretted missing vacations, birthdays, and relationships because I was too busy cleaning up your messes." I took a breath. But this silence, these boundaries, this peace, I don't regret a damn thing. They just stood there. No more comebacks. No more guilt. Because what do you say to someone who knows their worth now? Nothing. You leave. And they did. Not dramatically. Just slowly. Step by step. Like the weight of their own entitlement finally felt heavy in their hands. I closed the door behind them. Locked it. Then stood with my back against the wood, breathing deeply. Not with panic. With relief. Because I didn't just shut them out. I let myself in. They thought I was punishing them. I was just protecting myself. After they left my porch, the silence was clean. Not tense. Not awkward. Not unfinished. Just quiet, like something finally settled into place. It wasn't peace with them. It was peace with me. The text started 2 days later. First from Savannah. "So, we're just not talking now." I didn't respond. 12 hours later. "Fine. Enjoy your little tantrum." Still didn't reply. Then Claire chimed in with a message she probably thought sounded like grace. "We love you no matter what. We're here when you're ready." No apology. No accountability. Just a reframing of my pain as my problem. George, of course, said nothing. That was his way. Claire would handle the emotions. Savannah would handle the manipulation. George would sit silently in the background until someone handed him a bill to pay. Or, more often, handed it to me. But not this time. I spent the week doing things I hadn't done in years. Sleeping in, making breakfast that didn't come from a box or get eaten in front of my laptop. Reading real books, not bank statements or repair manuals or reviews for appliances my mom asked me to research. When you get a sec. I went for walks, without checking my phone. I deleted their contact shortcuts from my favorites list. I watched the sunset, undistracted. You know what happens when you stop answering people who took you for granted? They don't start apologizing. They start panicking. By Friday, the guilt texts had evolved into full-blown victim narratives. Savannah, I hope you're happy. Mom's been crying for 3 days. Lila asked why you hate her now. Claire, I don't know what we did that was so unforgivable. Families fight. That's normal. Then, I just wish you'd let us fix this. Let you fix this? You mean like I fixed your electric bill? Like I fixed your broken appliances and overdue notices and Amazon carts full of things you couldn't afford but needed me to cover? I didn't reply. Because some things don't need responses. They need endings. I ran into Natalie, my cousin, the only one who ever seemed to actually see me, at the grocery store that weekend. She paused in front of the cereal aisle like she was deciding whether to say something. Then she just said, "You look lighter." I smiled. "I am." She nodded. "They're all spinning, by the way. Savannah's furious. Your mom keeps trying to act like nothing happened. George, well, he's George." I laughed. "I heard about the Wi-Fi," she added. "Nice touch." I shrugged. Figured if I was going to stop being their crutch, I might as well let the floor creak a little. She looked at me for a moment, then leaned in. "You didn't lose them. You finally gave them a chance to find themselves." That line stuck with me for days. Because she was right. I didn't destroy them. I just stepped back and let them feel the weight of their own mess. And maybe that's what scared them most. One afternoon, I cleaned out a drawer full of old mail and paperwork. Found birthday cards I never opened. Grocery receipts with my mom's handwriting. A list of must-haves Savannah once gave me before her baby shower, none of which she paid for. It didn't make me bitter. It made me clear. These people didn't hate me. They just never saw me. Only the version of me that was helpful. And when that version stopped showing up, they got confused. Angry. Frantic. But I didn't return. Because returning meant shrinking again. And I'd finally outgrown the box they built for me. By the end of the week, I had changed all my passwords, switched out my phone plan, forwarded future bills to their actual homes, removed every shared subscription, booked a weekend cabin trip for myself, just me. No requests. No guilt. No wait. I sat by a fire pit that Saturday night, a beer in one hand and a fleece blanket around my shoulders, and for the first time in over a decade, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was still. Like the part of me that had been on call since I was old enough to be helpful, had finally logged out. The letter said, "We raised you better than this." But all I could think was, you didn't raise me at all. I raised myself. It arrived in an envelope with the old familiar handwriting. Mom's. The script was delicate, rehearsed, like it wanted to remind me of birthday cards and school lunch notes. The kind of writing that says, "Remember who we were before the truth showed up." Inside was a single piece of paper, lined, folded 3 times. The first line read, "We raised you better than this." No, dear. No, love. Just that. Like I'd broken some unspoken agreement by finally choosing myself. I read the letter once, slowly. She said I had always been the glue, the one who never let things fall apart. She said I had abandoned the family over one misunderstanding. She said Savannah was struggling, that George wasn't well, that the lights were back on, but something in the home feels dim. Then, the kicker, you might think you're protecting yourself, but family is family, and one day, you'll regret this. I folded the letter, tucked it back in the envelope, and set it on the kitchen counter. Not in rage, not in tears, just still, because I understood something I hadn't been able to admit until now. They didn't want to fix the damage. They wanted to erase the evidence. Later that day, I sat with the letter in my hand and remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. I was 12. Savannah had gotten into trouble at school. Fighting, suspension, drama, you name it. Claire was in tears. George was yelling. And in the middle of it all, I did something stupid. I offered to mow the lawn. I thought, maybe if the outside looked nice, the tension inside would ease. I was 12. That night, Claire told me I was such a good boy. George said, "At least one of you knows how to act." That's when I learned. Being useful earns affection. Cleaning up earns peace. But love? Love was never just given. That memory washed over me as I held the letter, and I finally said it. Out loud, alone in my kitchen. "You didn't raise me better. I raised myself." I walked to the fireplace, lit the letter, watched it curl and burn until the paper turned to weightless ash. Then I made tea. The truth is, I don't hate them. Not Claire. Not Savannah. Not even George. I just don't need them anymore. Not in the way they've always wanted me to. Not as a bank. A crutch. A silent fixer. I'm not carrying the guilt anymore. Or the groceries. Or the Wi-Fi. Or the phone plans. Or the shame. A week later, I got a message from Natalie again. "They're still spinning. Savannah's convinced you'll come back by Thanksgiving. Claire's started planning like you're already invited." I replied, "Let her plan. I've got other plans." I did. Plans to drive out to the coast. Stay in a little rental with a wood stove and no service. Plans to read. To breathe. To not be needed. People always say family is everything. But that's only true when everything includes respect. Reciprocity. Love that flows both ways. Otherwise, it's just a legacy of guilt with a nice photo album. I'm not bitter. I'm awake. I know now. I was never too sensitive. Never too dramatic. Never making it about money. I was just someone who finally decided not to be a background character in a family that only called when they couldn't pay the next bill. I don't know if I'll see them again. I don't know if they'll ever really understand. But here's what I do know. Every time they picked me for what I could give and discarded me when I asked for something in return, that wasn't love. That was leverage. And I'm not collateral anymore. So yeah, they said they raised me better. But in truth, they raised someone else entirely. The good son. The quiet provider. The bank with a heartbeat. The real me? I raised him myself. He didn't burn the bridge. He just stopped walking across it alone. This isn't revenge, it's restoration. And for anyone listening who's been carrying a family on their back, this is your reminder. You can stop now. You're allowed. You're not wrong.